Oh, we're live. Hi, everyone. Hello, I'm Beth O'Leary. I am the author of The Flat Share, The Switch and The Road Trip. We are just waiting for people to rock up and say hi. When you do arrive, please send me a little message in the comments and just say hello and what you're up to this evening, because it's actually 11 a.m. here. It is not the evening because I'm in England. Oh, hi, Anne-Lee. Hello. So yeah, it's bright and early here. I've actually had to draw a curtain because the sun is so bright that I thought I'd be squinting at you all. That is not the norm here in rainy England. So I think I'll be heading out with the dog soon to make the most of the good weather. Hi, Jodie. Oh, I'm sorry that it's cold where you are. Hi, Ali. Claire. Hi. Hello. Oh, this is lovely. I love being able to see everyone rocking up. Hi. Oh, it's 5 a.m. here, Jessica. Where are you? 8 p.m. in Melbourne, says Anne. Oh, okay. Well, I'm hoping everyone is either, cozied in pajamas or has a glass of bubbly or Hi from New Zealand. Hi, Natasha. Hi, Maddie. This is exciting. I am also very excited. Oh, this is lovely. Thanks for coming along, guys. So I will just, tell you a little bit about me. So I'm Beth O'Leary. I'm the author of 3 novels, The Flat Share, The Switch, and The Road Trip, which has only just come out. So that's, only been out a couple of weeks. Hi, Sarah. Sarah says, big fan of your books. Thank you so much, Sarah. So I'm here basically to tell you a little bit about the road trip, and to just have a chat, really. But I thought I would start by telling you a bit about me and how I got here to being a full-time author, which is still something that I find, kind of crazy to say, even on my 3rd book. So yes, I have always written. I can't remember ever not writing. Ever since I was a kid, and I grew up in a very big, noisy, loving family. I am one of 6 kids, so I think for me, kind of reading and then writing became a way to sort of escape the noise as an introvert in a big, not noisy household. But I think it was kind of like a little world to escape to when I wanted to kind of step out of the fray. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Natalie. Yes, so I have always written, and somewhere in the loft we have a bunch of old scrap paper with stories written in pencil on them, which I must have done when I was about, I don't know, in primary school sometime. And I actually, so my first novel, The Flat Share, I wrote on my commute to and from work. So I lived sort of an hour outside London, and so I had kind of 2 hours a day of uninterrupted time with really rubbish train Wi-Fi, and I sent the novel. I'd finished about 5 novels before I wrote The Flat Share, and I mean, God knows how many unfinished ones. But yeah, and I tried to get an agent before. I tried since I was about 17. I think I sent my first query to an agent, I sent The Flat Share to a handful of agents. I still remember how terrifying that felt. And only one of them wanted to read past the first 3 chapters. And that person is my agent now today. So if there are any writers out there, you really do just need one person who loves it and says yes. And we met for a coffee. I remember exactly what I wore because I thought so hard about that outfit. I just clicked with her straight away, and signed up with her. And then we kind of worked a little bit on the book together. She helped me to sort of make the first chapters a lot stronger. And then after that, it was just a whirlwind. I kind of went from being someone who didn't really even tell very many people about my writing. I always was a bit shy about it, to somebody who book sold in this like huge book deal, and it was selling in countries all over the world. And the Flat Share is now published in 34 languages. And it's sold, over 750,000 copies around the world. So it is, just a kind of a blur that time, like just a wonderful, I can't believe it's happening blur. And then I wrote my second novel, The Switch, as a full-time writer, because I was able to leave my job and go full-time, which was amazing and a really different experience, and challenging at times, as everybody says, the tricky second album. And I love that book to pieces now. So the concept of The Switch is that a grandmother and a granddaughter swap lives for 2 months, and it's sort of inspired by time spent with my grandma before she passed, in the beautiful little village in England where she lived, and I really wanted to celebrate kind of her fierceness and humour, while she was at her absolute prime. So it's a very special novel to me, but it was really hard to write, and there were times when I really didn't know I could do it. It was a lot of, I didn't want to let people down, I think, because so many lovely readers said how much they loved the Flat Share. So it was, a huge relief to have it out in the world and for it to hit the Sunday Times bestseller list again. And it's also been optioned by Amblin Partners, who are Steven Spielberg's production company, to be made into a film. So that was, that's something that's still kind of sinking in. And then my third book, which is just out a couple of weeks ago. I'm just turning gently so you can see the lovely shine on the title, because I love that. That novel was a dream to write. I think I just came out of the kind of nerves of writing The Switch and my second novel, and I flew through the road trip. It was the idea, once the idea was sort of set in my head, because I had the concept a long time ago of two exes crashing cars on their way to a mutual friend's wedding, which is kind of the core of the road trip, but it never felt like it was sort of a whole idea, and I have a lot of ideas like that kind of brew away in the back of my head, sort of half complete. And then I found the missing ingredient really when I was on holiday in France, in Provence, and I fell in love with it. It's such a romantic place, and I decided I wanted to write a love story set there, and I'd been kind of brewing over this idea of a road trip and it being two exes that crash, and then I thought, if it's exes, then they've already had one love story, and perhaps that love story could have taken place here in beautiful Provence in the south of France. And then once I had that, the book I wrote the first draft in a kind of frenzy. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was, I'd go out walking with the dog and it would be all I'd be thinking about. The characters never left me alone. And I it was such an immersive writing experience, the road trip. So it's very exciting to be sharing the book with you all. I've got to say this, I'm getting so many lovely messages. It's so nice to hear from you all. Thank you. Hannah says the road trip was such a fun read. Thank you, Hannah. Joy Bells asked, is it a sequel? It's not a sequel. All of my books are standalone, so you can read them in any order, or pick up whichever you fancy first. Anne says fingers crossed that it gets made into a movie. Tell me about it. Oh, thank you. Anne says, I love the characters in The Switch. I'm delighted to hear that. Joy Bell says, what was your first book? The Flat Share was my first book, or the first published book. The first finished book lives in a drawer, never to be seen again. I'll tell you a little bit more about the road trip, and perhaps some of the characters. So in the car, there are the two cars that crash at the start are Addie and Dylan's cars, and then they all pile into Addie's car because the other one doesn't make it through the crash. So all the passengers end up in one vehicle for the very long and very awkward journey from the south of England to a wedding in rural Scotland. So Dylan He's a romantic, he's a poet, he's a dreamer. He kind of comes from a very privileged upbringing, but a quite unhappy family. And then there's Addie, and she's very loyal. She's very kind of pragmatic and practical. So in that sense, she sees the world very differently from Dylan. And she's always sort of been the like second choice or the middling one until we meet her in the story. And you know, that kind of, I think she's just finding herself and finding her kind of her voice, I guess, when we meet her in the book. And then there's her sister Deb, who this road trip is her first journey away from her kid, and she has a really kind of fierce sisterly bond with Addie, which I loved writing. I'm really close with my sister, and the book is dedicated to my bridesmaids. My sister was one of those, and that kind of group of women in my life, their sort of support is really reflected, I think, in the relationship between Addie and Deb. And then we have Marcus, who is Dylan's best mate / hasn't spoken to him for a while. There's a really complicated past there. And Marcus is such a key character in the novel for me. He's kind of, in some ways, just a really nasty man. But I didn't really want to leave him just at that. And I really wanted to kind of explore his character. It would have been easy to make him a sort of villain. And I wanted to actually kind of dig in a bit more and kind of, I guess, just ask, could he be forgiven or, you know, why is he the way he is? So he sort of walks that line between being just like somebody that you would never want to have around and someone that, despite yourself, you're a little bit charmed by. And then the last person in the car in the road trip is Rodney. Rodney is a complete randomer. He just posted on the Facebook group saying that he needed a ride to the wedding. And so Addie and her sister took pity on him, and he ends up stuck in this car with all these people that have this kind of huge history together. And he was a really helpful character for me because, for starters, he kind of brought a lot of the comedy. He sort of, there's so much kind of tense conversation, but of course it all goes over his head. So he's very handy for kind of deflating a moment that's getting very dark and difficult or intense. And he was also good for just asking the questions that the reader needs answered, because we're also kind of out of the loop. We don't know what the history is. And so I could kind of use Rodney a little bit there to kind of get the answers that we're looking for as well. Kate Jackson says, I love the road trip. One of my favorite moments was when Rodney is on the phone to Dylan whilst wading in a river. I love that scene. I think it might be my favorite scene in the book. And it was one of those ones that just, and I often find this with comic scenes, they either come straight away or they don't come at all. They come at great pain. Because that scene, I just, as soon as I started writing it didn't change very much in edits at all. And my favorite bit is when I think Dylan rings Rodney back and Rodney's like, hello, Rodney speaking, or something. Dylan's like, what? Like, I know it's you. We've just spoken. So yeah, I think that's probably one of my favorite scenes as well, Kate. Rachel says, have you started writing book 4 yet? Or will you have a well-deserved writing break now to focus on welcoming your baby soon? Rachel is fully up to speed. Yes, I am 8 months pregnant. So, but I've not only started writing book 4, I have almost finished. So it will be coming next spring. And I am kind of in the last stages of editing it. And I'm really, really excited about this one. I can't say anything about it, but we are hoping to maybe share a little bit about it before the baby comes. So yeah, watch this space. Watch my social media. You might be able to get some hints. My lovely publisher has said Rodney is the only stranger we'd recommend you bring on a road trip. Yes, good point. One should be careful bringing strangers on a road trip. So yeah, one of the challenging things about writing this book is that it, like I say, it kind of moves between then and now. So we have the car journey, and then we have Addie and Dylan's first love story, essentially. So years before, when they met in the south of France. And so it was kind of so that you kind of move between the two. And I thought hard about maybe writing it chronologically. So maybe starting with the beginning of the then and moving all the way through to the now, and then sort of splicing the novel together and putting it on the two narratives on top of each other. But in the end, I felt like what the reader experiences is the back and forth, and I wanted the pacing to feel right, and I wanted, the moments when you need a little light relief, or when you've had a lot of comedy and you want a bit of depth. And it was hard to sort of structure that if I was writing chronologically. So in the end, I wrote it how you read it, switching back and forth, which presented some challenges. One of which was that I really wanted their voices to feel. I wanted to show that the characters had grown, and between the then and the now, and so their voices kind of needed to feel like very much like them, but just like a slightly different them between the then and the now. So that was challenging, especially with switching back and forth between times. And also just making sure that I got all the facts in the right order. So I did actually do several edits where I read it as though I was reading kind of from then to now, because I thought that way I can kind of keep track of the timeline, but still be writing it in the way that makes sense to the reader. Hannah Markham says, I love the dual timelines. Thank you. Yes, I'm glad to hear that, especially as it was a challenge. And Preston says, are you a plotter or a pantser? I like this question, although I never have a very good answer to it. So for anyone who doesn't know, a pantser kind of means someone who flies by the seat of their pants, who just kind of writes as it comes. Sorry, gulp of my tea. I'm sort of a mix of the two, actually. I when I first have an idea, it kind of grows from usually a question that I'm excited about. So something like, what if we put 5 people who all have a history together, or mostly all have a history together, in a car, and what would happen? And then if that question kind of grows into something more, as this one did, and if it starts to kind of grow characters, that's always a sign that it's a goer. And after that point, I usually just dive in. So I usually just try and find the voice. Often I've kind of got an idea of how the story might start in my head anyway at that point. So I just sort of I just get in there. And so in that sense, I guess I'm kind of making it up as I go along, because I'm really not sure where it's going to go. And then usually after a few, maybe 20,000 words, there's all kinds of stories of scenes and things popping into my head as I'm going. So I kind of dump everything on a page, and I'm not sure you'd call it a plan, but it's sort of everything that's ticking away in my head, or the little bits and bobs written down, just because my head is starting to feel a bit full. And then I never look at that again, usually, and I keep going with that in mind. I think the process of putting it down on the page is kind of my planning stage, and then maybe I do it again once or twice more before I hit the end of the book, if I've sort of realized something big that changes the plot, and then I have a first draft, which is always terrible, and I find them so painful to read, my first drafts. So what I do is I put them on an e-reader, so I can't fiddle. Like if I read it on my laptop, I will tweak and tweak. So yeah, I put it on my e-reader, and I sit in that chair, which you can see behind me, and I read it, and I squirm because it's painful, and I kind of make notes as I go of all the things I want to change, and that second draft is really where a book is made for me. The first draft is such a mess, and it doesn't really know what it is yet, and neither do I, and yeah, that's kind of my process. So I'm not sure that you'd call me a plotter or a pantser, really, just kind of an odd mix of the two. Tracy says, looking forward to reading your next book. Thank you. Tammy says, I've just read The Flat Share and loved it. I snorted coffee out of my nose laughing. Sorry, I think. Thank you, and sorry. Oh, Tracy says, I can't wait to find out more about book 4. Soon, I hope. Isabel says, what are some of your inspirations or some favourite books to read that you could recommend us? Oh, I love this question. And I always have more books to recommend than I can fit in any conversation. I just finished actually Christina Lauren's new book, The Soulmate Equation. I read that on holiday last week. That is a beautiful book. It's such a lovely love story with a character who she's a single mum to a 7-year-old, and she's so used to putting everyone else first, and she sort of ends up in this situation where the creator of a dating app, which claims to be able to match people with their perfect match, she's supposed to be, it turns out, possibly matched with him, and it's just a really beautiful love story, and it really made me smile. It was the perfect read for when on holiday, so I loved that. And I'm listening to Talia Hibbert's Take a Hint, Danny Brown on audiobook at the moment and loving it. The first book in that series of hers, Get a Life, Chloe Brown, is just was one of my big finds of last year. I really loved it. It's such a beautiful romance and really funny, and it's nice to be listening to. I'm kind of audiobooks, I tend to I love them, but I tend to be quite slow on them because it sort of there has to be a reason for me to be listening. So this one is ticking away whilst I'm doing bits and bobs, but I'm absolutely loving it. So I really recommend that series. And in terms of inspirations, an author I'm really inspired by is Marion Keyes, and her new book, her most recent book, Grown Ups, is probably her best, I think. So I would definitely recommend giving her a go if you've not read Marion Keyes before. Speaking of audiobooks, Anne says, I listened to all 3 books. Great choice with the narrators. They're amazing, aren't they? And I don't pick them. My publishers pick them, but they always come to me with these kind of ideas of people, and I think really we can get them because we've got some amazing narrators for all 3 books. And it's very strange for me listening to the audiobooks because it's having your work read aloud is quite hard to listen to. So I love listening to it, but then after a bit I have to be okay, stop, because otherwise you're going to want to slightly tweak every line. We have another. Jessica says, Take a Hint, Danny Brown is amazing. Another fan of Talia Hibbert. I'm in good company. Annabelle asks, she says, I have loved all your books. Thank you, Annabelle. Do you always write within the genre of these books, or do you think you will ever write a book in a different genre? So when the novels that I wrote before the flat share were kind of young adult, and I think that was partly because I started kind of writing novels when I was a teenager, and so sort of just kept doing that, and then I kind of found, I think, an adult voice whilst writing the flat share, and I just felt this is me, this is where I'm meant to be, and after that it would feel very strange to write anything else now. And what I write is what I love to read, stories about uplifting stories about love, about people who maybe come to love a little bruised, and I hope what I write is sort of love stories that feel kind of grounded in the real world, and maybe make you smile at the end even more because of that. And that's what I want to read. So I kind of can't see myself doing anything else, but I never say never. Maybe one day I will come up with a concept for a super dark, twisty thriller, but I can't see it happening. I like bringing little bits, kind of into my writing that maybe aren't sort of, I guess, my rom-coms tend to have some darker themes woven through them, and I like challenging myself with each book to do something a bit new and different. So I think, in the road trip, Marcus was a real challenge for me because I wanted to explore a character who I don't think I would necessarily like, but sort of dig into him a bit more. So with each book, I like to kind of push myself a little in a new direction, but I think I will probably always write books that I hope make people smile. Lots of people talking about the other books that they'd love to read. So I thought, oh, we've only got 5 minutes left. Let me scroll up and see if there are any questions that I have missed, because everyone's been sending such lovely messages as we go along. Christy said, I played the Switch audiobook for my mum and she loved it as much as I did. Thank you for such a special book. That's really lovely. Thank you. Malvina asks, do you think any of your other books in the drawer will see the light of day? No. Although I would say there is one book in the drawer that I still think has a great concept at the heart of it. And, you know, I would never want to share that story now, but I do wonder if I might come back to the concept at the kind of root of it and find a different way to make it work. Because like I say, it was a sort of teen read, and you know, that's not what I want to write now. But yeah, just the kind of hooky little question at the heart of it still comes back to me. So perhaps that one will in some way see the light of day one day. Thank you all for the lovely people saying that they enjoyed the road trip. That's really kind. Hannah says, you are one of my go-to authors. Will read and pre-order anything you write. Thank you, Hannah. That is so lovely. And I feel like that's such a, I don't know, I'm a big reader too. And there are, you know, authors on my list who are auto-buy authors for me. And it's so amazing to kind of be that for somebody else. So thank you. That is an honour. Janelle says, I love the flat share. Lots of laughs. Thank you. Anne asks, who is your favourite character to write in the road trip? That is a great question. Oh, do you know what? That's really hard. I think I would maybe say Rodney. I often find that my secondary characters are the ones that are the most fun because the pressure's off a little bit. I think with main characters, there's so much I want to do, and I need to know them inside out, and kind of it takes a long time to sort of dig in and figure out who they are. And actually with secondary characters, you kind of don't need that. So there's a little bit of license to sort of play a bit more. And Rodney was just so helpfully fully formed when he arrived. Like, he kind of turned up in the car and I knew who he was going to be. And as I said before, he was like a useful character for me as a writer because he gave me some range that I kind of wouldn't maybe have otherwise had. So yes, I really enjoyed writing him and Kevin, the lorry driver, who they meet en route. And maybe Cherry, whose wedding it is that they're going to, who is like an absolute, like, she's firecracker. She's bouncing off the walls all the time, incredibly high energy. She was fun as well. So I've basically told you 3, haven't I? That's not really my favourite character. Sorry. Clearly I love them all. I should probably say bye now. This has gone so fast. Thank you so much to everyone who's come along and asked questions. It's been lovely to chat to you all. But I should probably head out into the sunshine before it starts to rain again and take the dog out. But thank you so much to Better Reading for having me, and to my lovely publishers Hachette, and to everyone who came along. Thank you. And I hope, if you haven't read The Road Trip yet, that you enjoy it. And if you have, thank you so much for your support. So I'll say bye.